The hum of the servers was the only lullaby Nia Banks had known for the last 3 years. In the skeletal remains of a repurposed textile factory in Detroit's deeper, forgotten industrial district, the winter wind rattled the frosted windows, but inside, the air was warm and dry, smelling of ozone and stale coffee. Nia adjusted her glasses, the blue light of 6 monitors reflecting in her dark eyes as she watched the transaction mix through a dozen tumblers, bouncing from a server in Estonia to a relay in Singapore, before finally settling into a cold wallet she had buried under layers of encryption so dense it would take a quantum computer a century to crack. Or so she thought. She stretched, her braids falling over the shoulder of her oversized gray hoodie. They called her the crypto queen on the dark web, a phantom entity who could siphon millions from hedge funds and cartels without tripping a single alarm. But this last job was different. This wasn't a faceless bank or a corrupt insurance firm. She had hit the Geumodo Syndicate. She had taken $50 million in Bitcoin from the most dangerous criminal organization in South Korea. It was an act of hubris, a way to pay off her father's gambling debts and disappear forever. But as she stared at the final confirmation screen, a cold prickle of unease danced down her spine. The silence in the loft felt heavier than usual. The blinking green lights on her modem suddenly went solid red. Nia froze. Her fingers hovered over the mechanical keyboard. On her main screen, the complex visualizations of the blockchain dissolved. In their place, a single terrifying image appeared, a digital rendering of a white lotus flower blooming slowly in high definition. The symbol of the Geumodo. Panic, sharp and metallic, tasted like copper in her mouth. She slammed her hand onto the emergency kill switch she had wired to the desk, a magnet designed to fry the hard drives instantly, but nothing happened. The power didn't cut. The screens didn't go black. Instead, the white lotus continued to spin, mocking her. Then the text appeared, typing itself out character by character in perfect English. "Open the door, Nia." She spun around in her chair, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She grabbed the Glock she kept taped under the desk, racking the slide, but before she could aim at the heavy iron door of the loft, the electronic lock buzzed. It didn't break, it yielded. The door swung open with a slow, deliberate creak. There was no shouting, no chaotic raid, no flashbangs, just silence. 4 men entered first. They moved like smoke, dressed in tactical black gear, their faces covered, weapons held at the low ready. They fanned out with professional efficiency, securing the corners of the room in seconds. They didn't point their guns at her, they simply created a perimeter. Then he walked in. He was a stark contrast to the industrial grit of the Detroit loft. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that looked like it cost more than the entire building, tailored to perfection, hugging a frame that was lean but radiated a coiled, predatory strength. He was tall, his hair swept back in a style that emphasized the sharp, aristocratic angles of his face. His skin was pale, almost luminous under the harsh fluorescent lights, and his eyes were dark voids that seemed to absorb the room's energy. Kang Jae-sun, the Dragon of Seoul. She recognized him from the grainy surveillance photos she had studied before the heist, but the pictures didn't do justice to the terrifying gravity of his presence. He didn't look like a thug, he looked like a CEO or perhaps an executioner who enjoyed his work. Nia backed up until her hips hit the edge of her desk, the gun in her hand trembling slightly. She knew better than to fire. If she twitched, the 4 men in the shadows would turn her into a sieve before she could blink. Jae-sun stopped 10 feet away from her. He looked around the messy loft, his gaze lingering on the empty takeout boxes and the tangle of wires before finally settling on her. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, bordering on bored. "Put the toy away, Miss Banks," Jae-sun said. His voice was deep, smooth, and carried a faint accent that made the English words sound precise, almost surgical. "If we wanted you dead, I would have simply drone-stuck this building while you were sleeping." Nia swallowed hard, lowering the gun slowly but not letting go. "You hacked my kill switch," she said, her voice raspy. That's impossible. It's an analog circuit. Nothing is impossible when you have the resources I do, he replied, taking a step closer. He pulled a pair of black leather gloves from his pocket and began to put them on, finger by finger. The sound of the leather stretching was the only noise in the room. You stole $50 million from me. Do you know what we usually do to thieves, Nia? I imagine it involves a lot of pain, she shot back, her defiance a thin shield against the terror. You're here to make an example of me. An example? No. Yi-sun finished adjusting his gloves and clasped his hands behind his back. Examples are for low-level street thugs. You, on the other hand, are a marvel. You bypassed the firewall of the Geumodo ledger, a system designed by former North Korean cyber warfare specialists. You walked in, took the coin, and walked out. It took my team 3 days just to find the backdoor you used. I'm flattered, Nia said dryly. But since you're here, I assume the applause comes later. Yi-sun's lips twitched, almost a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm not here for the money, Nia. The 50 million is an inconvenience, but not a fatal one. I am here because the only way you could have breached that specific sector of my network is if someone on the inside lowered the drawbridge for you. Someone gave you the key, didn't they? Nia hesitated. He was right. She was a genius, yes, but the Geumodo security was impenetrable without a seed phrase provided by a user with admin privileges. An anonymous source had sold her the key on a dark web forum, claiming they just wanted to see the empire burn. She hadn't asked questions. She just took the key and the money. I don't know who it was. It was anonymous, encrypted comms only. I believe you, Yi-sun said, closing the distance between them. The scent of him, sandalwood, tobacco, and cold winter air hit her. He was now standing directly in front of her, towering over her. He reached out, and for a second she flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, he reached past her and tapped a key on her keyboard. The screen changed, showing a complex web of transactions that Nia didn't recognize. But you are going to find out. You are the only person who has seen the digital footprint of the traitor. You tracked the money out. Now, you will track the source in. And if I say no, Nia asked, looking up at him. She was tall for a woman, but he still had to tilt his head down to look at her. Then the $50 million becomes the price of your life, Yi-sun said softly. He reached out again, this time placing a gloved hand under her chin, tilting her face up. His touch was firm, possessive. You have a choice, Crypto Queen. You can be the thief who died in a tragic electrical fire in Detroit, or you can be the consultant who helps Kang Jae-sun clean his house. I prefer the second option. You have a unique mind. It would be a waste to spill it on this concrete floor. Nia looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He wasn't bluffing. But she also saw something else, desperation masked as control. He was vulnerable. The traitor was close to him, someone high up. He couldn't trust his own IT team because any one of them could be the snitch. He needed an outsider. He needed her. I need my equipment, she said, her voice steadying. And I'm not working from a cell. Yi-sun dropped his hand, the ghost of that smirk returning. You will work from my side, where I can see you, where I can ensure you don't run. He turned to his men. Pack her rig. The main drives only. Burn the rest. Wait, Nia protested as the men moved in, dismantling her life's work in seconds. Where are we going? Yi-sun paused at the door, the winter wind howling as it rushed in to meet them. He looked back over his shoulder, the silhouette of a modern king in a dark underworld. Seoul, he said. Pack warm, Miss Banks. The game has only just begun. The flight was a blur of luxury and tension. Nia had never been on a private jet before, certainly not a Gulfstream G650 with cream leather interiors and a flight attendant who poured vintage whiskey without making eye contact. She sat on one side of the cabin, staring out at the clouds, while Yi-sun sat opposite her, reviewing documents on a tablet. He had removed his jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscular, corded with veins. On his left wrist sat a platinum watch that probably cost more than her childhood home. They had been in the air for 10 hours. The silence between them was thick, charged with an undefined electricity. Nia was trying to profile him to find a weakness, but he was a fortress. "Stop starring," he said without looking up from his screen. "It's loud." "I'm not starring," Nia lied, crossing her arms. "I'm calculating my survival probability." "And it's low," she admitted. "Even if I find your traitor, you can't let me live. I know too much. I've seen your face. I've hacked your accounts. The smart move is to use me and then dispose of me." Yi-sun finally looked up, closing the cover of his tablet. He studied her for a long moment. She was beautiful, he thought, though he would never say it aloud. Sharp features, skin that glowed like polished obsidian, and eyes that held a fierce intelligence. She wasn't like the women in his world, subservient, terrified, or manipulative. She was a predator in her own right, just hunting in a different jungle. "I am a businessman, Nia, not a butcher," Yi-sun said, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "In my world, loyalty is the only currency that matters. If you help me root out the cancer in my organization, you will have earned a debt. The Geumodo pays its debts." "Does it?" Nia challenged. "Or is that just what you tell people before you put them in concrete?" "You have a sharp tongue," he noted, his voice dropping an octave. "Be careful. It might get you into trouble that your keyboard cannot get you out of." "I'm already kidnapped by a mafia boss. How much more trouble can I be in?" Yi-sun stood up and walked over to her seat. The cabin was pressurized, quiet, suspended in the twilight between time zones. He placed a hand on the headrest of her chair, leaning in close. The proximity was overwhelming. She could feel the heat radiating off him. "You are not kidnapped," he murmured, his face inches from hers. "You are acquired. And as for trouble, Nia, you have no idea what real trouble looks like. The man who betrayed me, if he finds out I have you, he will not be as polite as I have been. He will send teams to kill us both. You are under my protection now. My shadow is the only safe place for you." Nia held his gaze, refusing to look away. "Then I guess we better find him fast." "We land in an hour," Yi-sun said, straightening up and buttoning his cuffs. "Seoul is waiting. Stay close to me. Do not speak unless spoken to. And Nia." "What?" "Don't try to run," he said, his voice devoid of threat but heavy with promise. "I enjoy the chase, but I do not like to run in a suit." As the plane began its descent toward the glittering sprawl of Seoul, Nia looked down at the city lights. Millions of people, millions of connections, millions of secrets. She was walking into the lion's den, hand in hand with the lion. She touched the keyboard of her laptop in her bag, her only weapon in a war she hadn't meant to start. She realized then that Yi-sun was right. The money didn't matter anymore. It was about survival. And strangely, as she looked at the profile of the man who could kill her with a snap of his fingers, she felt a thrill that had nothing to do with fear. Seoul at night was a galaxy of neon and rain, a sprawling organism of light that seemed to breathe against the tinted windows of the armored convoy. Nia sat in the back of the lead sedan, the leather cool against her skin, watching the Hanggang River blur past in streaks of violent violet and electric blue. The city felt alive, predatory, and vastly different from the rust and concrete decay of Detroit. Here, the danger was wrapped in silk and chrome. Beside her, Yi-sun was on his phone, speaking in rapid-fire Korean. His tone was low, clipped, and terrifyingly calm. He hadn't looked at her since they landed, shifting seamlessly from the mysterious abductor to the CEO of a criminal empire. The car slowed, turning up a winding private road that snaked around the side of a mountain overlooking the district of Gangnam. They approached a massive architectural marvel of glass and steel that cantilevered over the cliff edge, the Geumodo stronghold, disguised as a luxury private estate. "We are here," Yi-sun said, ending the call and sliding the phone into his jacket pocket. "This is my home. It is the only place in the city fully off the grid. No signals in or out unless I allow them." "A gilded cage," Nia muttered, stepping out into the humid night air as a servant opened her door. "Better a cage than a coffin," Yi-sun replied, walking past her. "Come, we have work to do." The interior was stark, minimalist, and intimidatingly expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city's soul, but Nia's eyes were drawn to the massive server rack integrated into the wall of the main living area. It was a piece of art, liquid-cooled, humming with a frequency she felt in her teeth. Yi-sun tossed his jacket onto a couch and poured 2 drinks from a crystal decanter. He handed her one amber liquid that smelled of peat and smoke. "Drink," he ordered gently. "You're shaking." Nia took the glass, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent a jolt through her that she tried to ignore. "I'm not shaking from fear. I'm shaking from withdrawal. I haven't touched a keyboard in 14 hours. Yi-sun's mouth curved into a faint smile. "An addict, I understand that." He gestured to a sleek, curved desk set up in front of the server wall. "It's all yours. I've isolated a sandbox environment for you. Connect your drive, find the signature." Nia sat down, and the moment her fingers touched the keys, the anxiety evaporated, replaced by the cold, logical trance of the code. She plugged in the SSD Yi-sun's men had salvaged from Detroit. The screen flooded with data. She began to overlay the transaction logs from her heist with the internal access logs of the Geumodo server. It was like looking for a needle in a stack of needles. Hours ticked by. The moon climbed high over Seoul. Yi-sun didn't leave. He sat on the sofa behind her, reading files, but she could feel his eyes on her back, a heavy, constant weight. "Here," she whispered, 3 hours later. Yi-sun was beside her in an instant, his presence overwhelming. He placed a hand on the back of her chair, leaning over her shoulder to look at the screen. His cheek was inches from hers. She could smell the soap on his skin and the faint metallic scent of the gun he still wore in a shoulder holster. "What did you find?" "The seed key used to open the back door," Nia explained, pointing to a string of hexadecimal code. "It wasn't just a random admin. It was a legacy key, one of the original root access codes created when your system was built." Yi-sun went still. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "There are only 3 people who have legacy keys: me, my brother, who is dead, and my chief of operations, Min-ho." "Well, unless your brother is haunting the blockchain, someone used his key," Nia said. "But look at the timestamp. The key was activated from a remote node. I can trace the IP, but I need to bypass your external firewall to ping the location. If I do that, I expose us." "Do it," Yi-sun commanded, his voice hard. Nia executed the command. The screen flashed red, then resolved into a map of Seoul. A pulsing blue dot appeared in the Itaewon district. "There," Nia said. "The signal is coming from a club called the Velvet Room. It's active right now. Whoever sold me the key is there." Yi-sun straightened up, his face a mask of cold fury. "The Velvet Room, it's a neutral ground, a place where the syndicates meet to gamble and trade without bloodshed. If Min-ho is there, he is meeting with buyers. He is selling more than just access keys. He is selling the organization piece by piece." He looked down at Nia. "Can you hack the club's surveillance from here? I need to see who he is meeting." "No," Nia said, shaking her head. "That place will be air-gapped. High-end criminal dens don't put their cameras on the net. I'd need to be within 50 feet of their local router to bridge the connection." Yi-sun stared at her for a long moment, assessing. Then he nodded. "Then we go to Itaewon." Nia stood up. "I'm a hacker, not a field agent. I sit in dark rooms and drink energy drinks. I don't do field ops." "You are the only one who can bridge the connection," Yi-sun said, grabbing her wrist. His grip was firm but not painful. "And I do not trust anyone else to watch my back tonight. If Min-ho is the traitor, then my personal guard could be compromised too. Tonight it is just you and me." He looked her up and down, frowning at her oversized hoodie and jeans. "But not like that. If we are walking into the Velvet Room, you need to look like you belong on my arm." 20 minutes later, Nia was standing in front of a floor-length mirror in one of the guest suites. She barely recognized herself. The dress Yi-sun had pulled from a closet of essentials was a midnight blue silk slip dress that clung to every curve of her body like a second skin. It was backless, with a slit that ran high up her thigh. She had let her braids fall loose, cascading down her back. She strapped a small, specialized hacking deck, no bigger than a smartphone, to her inner thigh with a garter, concealed by the dress. When she walked back into the living room, Yi-sun stopped loading a fresh magazine into his pistol. He looked up, and for the first time the mask slipped. His eyes widened slightly, sweeping over her with a raw, undeniable hunger. He stood there for a beat too long, silence stretching between them. "Will I pass?" Nia asked, her voice slightly breathless under his scrutiny. Yi-sun cleared his throat, holstering the weapon and buttoning his suit jacket. He walked over to her, his expression returning to that stoic calm, though his eyes burned. "You will be the most dangerous thing in the room," he said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a diamond choker. "Turn around." Nia turned, lifting her hair. She felt his cold fingers against the warmth of her neck as he clasped the jewelry. His breath hitched against her ear. "This contains a microphone and a tracker. If we get separated, tap the stone twice. I will find you, no matter what." "Let's just hope we don't get separated," Nia whispered. The drive to Itaewon was tense. The Velvet Room was an underground fortress beneath a high-end hotel. The bass from the music vibrated in the pavement before they even entered. Yi-sun played the part of the bored, wealthy patron perfectly, his hand resting possessively on the small of Nia's back as they navigated the VIP entrance. The club was an assault on the senses. Red lights, smoke, the smell of expensive perfume and sweat. "Stay close," Yi-sun murmured against her ear. "The router is in the manager's office behind the bar. We need to get you close enough to clone the signal." They moved through the crowd, a shark cutting through a school of fish. People parted for Yi-sun, bowing their heads in respect and fear. Nia felt the eyes on her, envy, lust, curiosity. She kept her hand on her thigh just above the concealed device. "There," Yi-sun indicated with a tilt of his head. Across the room, in a semi-private booth surrounded by bodyguards, sat a man with a scarred face, laughing with a group of Russians. "That is Min-ho." "He looks happy for a man betraying his boss," Nia noted. "He thinks he is untouchable. He thinks I am still in Detroit hunting a ghost." Yi-sun guided her toward the bar, which was situated directly under the office loft. "Dance with me." "What?" "We need to stall. The signal bridge takes time, yes." Yi-sun pulled her onto the crowded dance floor. The music was slow, heavy, a pulsing rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. He pulled her flush against him, one hand holding hers, the other splayed wide across her bare back. The heat between them was instantaneous. 3 minutes, Nia said, her voice shaky. She activated the device on her thigh with a subtle tap. "I need 3 minutes to handshake with the router." "I can give you 3 minutes," Yi-sun said, looking down at her. His eyes searched hers. "You are doing well, Nia." "I'm terrified," she admitted, looking up at him. "This isn't a game. These people kill for sport." "I kill for necessity," Yi-sun corrected. He lowered his head, his lips grazing her temple. "And tonight the necessity is high." Nia closed her eyes, letting the data stream into her device, visualizing the progress bar in her mind. 50%, 60%. But then the music cut out. The lights slammed on, blindingly bright. The crowd gasped. From the VIP booth, Min-ho stood up, holding a microphone. He looked directly at them, a cruel smile twisting his scarred lips. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced in English, his voice booming over the speakers. "It seems we have uninvited royalty. The dragon has returned from America, and he brought a pet." Yi-sun went rigid against her. "He knew," Yi-sun whispered, a deadly calm settling over him. "It's a trap." "I'm at 90%, Nia hissed. "I just need 10 seconds. "You won't get them," Yi-sun said. He released her hand and stepped in front of her, shielding her body with his own as the Russians in the booth stood up, drawing weapons. The crowd screamed and scrambled for the exits. "Get behind the bar," Yi-sun ordered, his voice commanding. "Now." As the first gunshot cracked through the air, Shattering a bottle of vodka next to them, Yi-sun moved. He didn't just fire back, he flowed. He drew his weapon and put 2 rounds into the nearest bodyguard before the man could fully raise his gun. Nia scrambled over the bar top, glass crunching under her heels, crashing to the floor behind the heavy oak counter. She checked the device on her leg. Download complete. I got it, she screamed over the noise of the gunfire. Yi-sun slid over the bar next to her, reloading with practiced speed. A bullet chipped the wood inches from his head. He looked at her, eyes blazing with adrenaline. Good. Now we just have to survive the exit. He grabbed her hand, squeezing it tight. When I move, you run. Do not look back. Do not stop. What about you? Nia cried, grabbing his lapel. I am the distraction, Yi-sun said. And before she could protest, he leaned in and kissed her, hard, desperate, and tasting of violence. It lasted only a second, but it seared her soul. He pulled back, eyes dark. Go. He vaulted back over the bar, firing into the oncoming wave of men. Nia scrambled toward the service exit, clutching her device, her heart breaking in her chest as she left him behind in the chaos. The cold rain of the Seoul night hit Nia like a physical blow as she burst through the heavy steel service door into the alleyway. The muffled thud of gunshots and screaming from inside the club vibrated against her back. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to vanish into the labyrinth of neon-soaked streets, to find an internet cafe, and wire herself enough money to disappear to an island with no extradition treaty. But her feet wouldn't move. She stood there, shivering in the soaking wet silk dress, clutching the hacking deck that burned against her thigh. The image of Yi-sun vaulting over that bar, eyes dark with a resolve that promised death, was seared into her retinas. He had kissed her, not a goodbye but a promise, and he had stayed behind to buy her time. Damn it, she hissed, wiping rain and wet hair from her eyes. I am going to regret this. Nia didn't run away. Instead, she ran toward a junction box attached to the brick wall of the hotel. It was a messy tangle of fiber optics and power lines, protected by a rusted padlock. She grabbed a discarded brick from the muddy ground and smashed the lock, adrenaline lending her strength she didn't know she possessed. She ripped the panel open and jacked her deck directly into the smart meter, controlling the building's grid. Come on, she muttered, her fingers flying over the miniature interface as rain blurred the screen. Let there be darkness. She bypassed the surge protectors and intentionally overloaded the circuit breakers for the basement levels. A shower of sparks rained down on her, and with a deep, mechanical groan, the power to the velvet room died. The thumping bass, the exterior lights, the ventilation, everything cut out instantly. Silence fell over the alley for a heartbeat, followed by the chaotic sounds of panic from inside. The service door kicked open again. Nia flattened herself against the wet brick, heart hammering. A figure stumbled out, coughing, a silhouette against the smoke billowing from the doorway. It was Yi-sun. He was limping, his pristine white shirt now stained crimson at the side, his gun held loosely in his right hand. He looked like a fallen angel, battered but still standing. He scanned the alley, wild-eyed, and when his gaze landed on her, his expression shifted from relief to fury. He staggered toward her, grabbing her shoulders with bloody hands. I told you to run, he roared over the sound of the rain, though his voice was ragged. Why are you still here? I turned the lights out, she shouted back, defiant, grabbing his lapels to steady him. You're welcome, and I don't abandon my partners. We are not partners, he groaned, wincing as he leaned his weight against her. You are a liability. I'm the only reason you're not a corpse right now. Can you walk? I can fight, he gritted out. Walking is what I need. The car, where is the extraction? Compromised, Yi-sun spat. Min-ho will have the streets watched. We cannot use my vehicles. Nia looked around. A delivery van was idling at the mouth of the alley, the driver likely inside the club checking out the commotion. Fine, we improvise. They moved together, a three-legged creature of desperation, toward the van. Nia shoved Yi-sun into the passenger seat and jumped behind the wheel. She didn't need a key. A screwdriver from the glove box and 2 wires stripped with her teeth were enough to roar the engine to life. She slammed the car into gear just as the alley filled with Min-ho's men, their flashlights cutting through the rain. Bullets pinged against the back doors, but Nia didn't flinch. She floored it, drifting onto the main road, merging into the blinding stream of Seoul traffic. "Drive," Yi-sun wheezed, his head lolling back against the headrest. "North, Bukchon, I have a safe house. Old City." The drive was a blur of adrenaline. Nia drove with the aggressive precision of someone who had learned to escape the police on the icy streets of Detroit. She wove through the traffic, watching the mirrors, her hand occasionally reaching out to check Yi-sun's pulse. He was fatting, the blood loss taking its toll. They abandoned the van 2 blocks away from the safe house to avoid tracking and walked the rest of the way through the winding, narrow alleys of the Bukchon Hanok village. The traditional wooden houses, with their curved, tiled roofs and stone walls, were a ghostly contrast to the neon madness of Itaewon. It was quiet here, ancient. Yi-sun led her to a small, nondescript gate. He punched a code into a hidden keypad, and the lock clicked. Inside, it was a traditional courtyard home, silent and dark. He collapsed onto the wooden floor of the entryway the moment the door closed behind them. "Yi-sun," Nia dropped to her knees, her hands hovering over his side. The blood was dark against his white shirt. "Kitchen," he rasped, pointing. "First aid, vodka." Nia moved. She found the kit, military grade, and a bottle of traditional soju instead of vodka. She rushed back, ripping his shirt open. The bullet had gouged a deep trench along his ribs. It was ugly and it was bleeding freely, but it hadn't punctured the lung. "This is going to hurt," she warned, her hands shaking slightly as she threaded the suture needle. Yi-sun looked at her, his eyes hazy but focused. He reached out, his hand cold, and cupped her face. "You stayed," he whispered, as if he still couldn't believe it. "Hold still," she commanded, her voice thick with emotion. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound with the alcohol, stitching the flesh back together. Yi-sun didn't scream. He hissed through his teeth, his muscles bunching under her touch, sweat beading on his forehead. When she was done, she bandaged him tightly. She sat back on her heels, exhausted, her hands covered in his blood. The adrenaline was crashing now, leaving her trembling. The room was cold, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the paper screens. Yi-sun sat up slowly, testing the bandages. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the blood on her dress, the fear in her eyes, and the fierce strength that held her together. "You saved my life," he said, the barrier between them completely gone. "You saved mine first," Nia replied quietly. "At the club, you put yourself between me and the bullets. I would do it again." He reached out, taking her hand, pulling her closer. Nia didn't resist. She moved into the space between his legs, nailing there, the air thick with the scent of rain, antiseptic, and iron. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm just a hacker who stole from you." "You know that is not true," Yi-sun murmured. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. "You are the only person in 10 years who has looked at me and not seen a monster or a paycheck. In that alley, you came back for me. No one comes back for the dragon." "I'm from Detroit," Nia half smiled, tears stinging her eyes. "We're stubborn." Yi-sun closed the distance. This time the kiss wasn't desperate or violent. It was slow, deep, and overwhelmingly intimate. It was a claiming. Nia's hands found their way into his hair, pulling him closer, needing the contact to prove they were both still alive. The danger outside, Min-ho, the Geumodo, the millions of dollars, ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his skin, the taste of him, the way his hand moved to the small of her back, pulling her flush against his chest, careful of his wound but possessive all the same. "Stay with me," he breathed against her lips. "Tonight, stay." "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. They fell asleep on the futon in the main room, tangled together, exhaustion finally claiming them. For a few hours, the world was silent. But peace is a luxury in their world, and it was short-lived. Nia woke up before dawn. The light was gray and thin. She carefully untangled herself from Yi-sun's arm, watching him sleep for a moment. In repose, the lines of cruelty on his face smoothed out. He looked younger, burdened. She resisted the urge to kiss him and instead grabbed her hacking deck from her discarded dress. She sat in the corner of the room, wrapped in one of Yi-sun's silk robes, and booted up the drive she had cloned at the club. The data streamed across the small screen: financial records, communication logs, encrypted chats. She began to decrypt the files Min-ho had been trading. As the text unspooled, Nia's blood ran cold. "Oh no," she whispered. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was an annihilation. "What is it?" Yi-sun's voice was rough with sleep. He was sitting up, wincing slightly, the sheet pooling at his waist. He watched her with a softness that vanished the moment he saw the look on her face. "Min-ho isn't just selling your territory," Nia said, turning the screen toward him. "He's selling the entire infrastructure of the Geumodo to the Blue Storm Collective. It's a Chinese state-sponsored cyber warfare group." Yi-sun's face hardened into stone. "Blue Storm, they don't want territory, they want access." "Exactly," Nia said, typing rapidly. "They want your server farms. They want the backdoor into the South Korean banking sector that your family built. But that's not the worst part." She hit a key, bringing up a countdown timer. "The transfer is automated, it's a logic bomb. Min-ho triggered it when we entered the club." She checked the timer. 50 minutes, the root access to your entire empire transfers to Blue Storm. Your accounts, your leverage, your identity, everything will be wiped and overwritten. You won't just be broke, Yi-sun. You'll be erased. The Geumodo will cease to exist, and Blue Storm will control the financial data of half of Seoul." Yi-sun stood up, ignoring the pain in his ribs. He walked to the window, looking out at the waking city. The romantic haze of the night was gone, replaced by the cold steel of the warlord. 50 minutes, he repeated. "We cannot stop a digital transfer from here. We need a direct line to the mainframe." "The mainframe is at your estate," Nia said, "which is swarming with Min-ho's men by now." "No," Yi-sun turned to her. "The estate is the relay, the core, the physical hard line where the transfer can be severed, is in the basement of the Geumodo Tower in the city center, the fortress." "The most secure building in Korea?" Nia asked, standing up. "That's suicide." Yi-sun walked over to a wooden chest in the corner of the room. He opened it, revealing a cache of weapons and fresh tactical gear. He tossed a black Kevlar vest to Nia. "It is not suicide," Yi-sun said, a dark, terrifying smile touching his lips. "It is a hostile takeover. Can you stop the transfer if I get you to the terminal?" Nia caught the vest. She looked at the timer. 48 minutes. She looked at the man who had held her through the night, the man who was about to go to war for his legacy. "If you get me to that terminal," Nia said, pulling the vest on over the silk robe, "I can rewrite the laws of physics if I have to. But we need a ride." Yi-sun racked the slide of a fresh pistol. "I have a Ducati in the shed. Hang on tight, Crypto Queen. We have an empire to save." They stepped out into the misty dawn, the quiet of the safe house left behind. The final countdown had begun. The Ducati roared like a captured beast, tearing through the waking streets of Seoul. Nia clung to Yi-sun's waist, her face pressed against the leather of his jacket, the wind whipping her hair into a frenzy. They were a blur of black steel and desperation, weaving between morning commuters and delivery trucks. The pain in Yi-sun's side must have been excruciating with every sharp turn and sudden acceleration, but his body was rigid, fueled by a terrifying focus. He wasn't just a man riding a motorcycle. He was a force of nature reclaiming his territory. The Geumodo Tower loomed ahead, a monolith of black glass piercing the gray sky. It was a fortress in every sense of the word. "Hold on," Yi-sun shouted over the engine's scream. He didn't slow down for the security checkpoint. Instead, he revved the engine to its limit and swerved onto the sidewalk, scattering pedestrians. He drove the motorcycle straight up the wide stone stairs and through the plate-glass revolving doors of the main lobby. The crash was deafening, a symphony of shattering glass and screeching tires. The bike skidded across the polished marble floor, sparks flying, before coming to a halt near the elevators. Security guards drew their weapons, but they froze. They recognized the man stepping off the bike. Yi-sun, despite the blood seeping through his white shirt under his jacket, straightened his cuffs and looked at them with the eyes of a god looking at insects. "Anyone who fires dies," he stated calmly, his voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. "Anyone who lowers their weapon keeps their job." Hesitation rippled through the guards. Loyalty battled with fear. But before anyone could decide, the elevator doors dinged open. A squad of heavily armed mercenaries, Min-ho's personal cleanup crew, stepped out. They didn't care about loyalty. They opened fire. "Move!" Yi-sun shoved Nia behind a marble pillar as bullets chipped away the stone. The lobby erupted into chaos. Yi-sun moved with a fluidity that defied his injury. He returned fire with precision, taking down two mercenaries with double taps to the chest. He wasn't fighting for survival anymore. He was clearing a path. "Nia, the service elevator, go." "I'm not leaving you," she screamed, covering her head as debris rained down. "You are not leaving me," he fired back, reloading in one smooth motion. "You are going to the basement to save my soul. I will handle the bodies." He turned to her, eyes blazing. "Go to the core. Do what you do best. I will be right behind you." Nia looked at him one last time, seeing the blood, the resolve, and the love masked as violence. She nodded, scrambled across the floor while Yi-sun laid down suppression fire and slammed her hand onto the call button of the freight elevator. The doors groaned open. She dived inside, hitting the button for sub-level 4. As the doors closed, the last thing she saw was Yi-sun advancing on the mercenaries, a pistol in each hand. The descent felt like an eternity. Nia checked the timer on her watch. 8 minutes. 8 minutes until the Geumodo Empire was overwritten by Blue Storm. The elevator shuddered to a halt. The doors opened into a cold, sterile corridor bathed in blue server light. The air hummed with the sound of cooling fans. This was the brain of the beast. Nia sprinted down the hallway toward the main terminal room. She burst through the double doors, her chest heaving. The room was vast, filled with rows of towering server racks. In the center, on a raised platform, sat the master terminal, and standing in front of it, watching the progress bar on a massive screen, was Min-ho. He turned slowly, a smug smile on his scarred face. He held a gun, but he didn't raise it immediately. He looked at Nia with amusement. "The American thief. I expected Yi-sun to be dead by now. He is losing his touch." "He's busy," Nia said, walking steadily toward the platform, her hands raised but her mind racing. She needed to get to that keyboard. "He sent me to accept your surrender." Min-ho laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Surrender? Look at the screen, girl. 96% complete. Blue Storm already has the keys. In 3 minutes, I walk out of here with more money than God, and Yi-sun becomes a ghost." "You're not just selling him out," Nia said, stepping onto the platform. "You're selling out your country. Blue Storm is foreign intelligence." "Business is business," Min-ho shrugged, raising the gun to aim at her chest. "Step away from the console. I'd hate to ruin that pretty dress before I kill you." Nia froze. She was 5 feet from the keyboard. The progress bar hit 97%. She calculated the distance. She could lunge, but he would shoot her. She needed a distraction. Suddenly, the lights in the server room flickered. The heavy steel door behind Nia exploded inward, flying off its hinges with a deafening clang. Min-ho flinched, turning his aim toward the door. Yi-sun stood in the smoke, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead, his suit jacket gone, his shirt soaked in red. He looked barely human. He looked like vengeance incarnate. "Min-ho," Yi-sun roared, the sound primal. "Kill him," Min-ho screamed at the two guards flanking the terminal, who Nia hadn't even noticed in her focus on the screen. As the guards opened fire on Yi-sun, Nia dropped. She didn't dive for cover, she dived for the keyboard. Yi-sun took the bullets. One hit his shoulder, spinning him around, but he didn't fall. He used the momentum to return fire, dropping both guards with terrifying accuracy. Min-ho, realizing his men were down, turned his gun back to Yi-sun, firing wildly. Yi-sun charged him, tackling him off the platform. The two men crashed into a rack of servers, sparks showering down on them as they grappled on the floor. Nia scrambled up to the console, 98%. Her fingers flew across the mechanical keys. The syntax was complex, a polymorphic encryption that was rewriting itself every second. Blue Storm was good, but Nia Banks was the crypto queen. She didn't try to stop the transfer. There wasn't enough time to build a wall. Think, she muttered, sweat stinging her eyes. Below her, the fight was brutal. Min-ho had a knife now, slashing at Yi-sun's already wounded side. Yi-sun groaned, catching Min-ho's wrist, the two of them locked in a death struggle. "You're too late," Min-ho screamed, driving the knife inch by inch toward Yi-sun's throat. "It's over." 99%. "I don't need to stop it," Nia whispered, a manic grin spreading across her face. "I just need to redirect it." She remembered the exploit she had used to steal Yi-sun's Bitcoin in the first place, the backdoor in the legacy code. She typed in the command. Instead of blocking the upload, she inverted the handshake protocol. Target destination, update. New target, cold storage, loopback address. She hit enter just as the counter hit 100%. The screen flashed green, transfer complete. Min-ho, seeing the green light, laughed in triumph, relaxing his guard for a split second. "I won, it's gone." "Look again," Yi-sun gritted out, seizing the moment. He twisted Min-ho's wrist with a sickening crack, forcing the knife to drop. On the screen, the text changed. "Error, remote host unreachable. Data REROUTED2 local archive. Blue Storm connection, TERMINATD." Min-ho's eyes went wide. "What? No. You didn't send the data to China," Nia said, leaning over the railing, her voice trembling but triumphant. "You just sent it to my personal encrypted cloud. I own it all now. The money, the codes, the blackmail, I own the Geumodo." Min-ho stared at her in horror. In that moment of distraction, Yi-sun moved. He pulled a small, concealed blade from his belt and drove it into Min-ho's chest. The traitor gasped, his eyes locking with his former boss's. "Loyalty," Yi-sun whispered into his ear as the life faded from Min-ho's eyes. It was the only currency required. Yi-sun shoved the body away and slumped against the server rack, sliding down to the floor. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the machines. Nia vaulted over the railing, landing beside him. She ripped the hem of her dress, pressing the silk against the fresh wound on his shoulder. "Stay with me. Don't you dare close your eyes." Yi-sun looked up at her, his face pale, covered in sweat and blood, but his eyes were clear. He reached up, his hand trembling, and touched her cheek. "Did we win?" "We won," Nia said, tears finally spilling over. "I saved your empire, although technically I think I own it now." Yi-sun let out a weak, raspy laugh that turned into a cough. "I cannot think of a better ruler." "Shut up and save your strength," she ordered, kissing his forehead. "The police are coming. I can hear the sirens." "Let them come," Yi-sun murmured, leaning his head back against the metal rack. "My lawyers will be here first, and you have the leverage." Nia looked at the screen where the blinking cursor showed her control over billions of dollars of assets. Then she looked at the man bleeding out in her arms. The man who had crossed an ocean to find her, who had taken a bullet for her, who had looked at her and seen a queen. She reached up to the keyboard and typed one last command. "Delete all YN." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then hit Y. The screen went black. The blackmail, the dirty secrets, the leverage gone. Only the clean assets remained. "What did you do?" Jae-sun asked softly. "I cleaned house," Nia said, gripping his hand tight. "If we're going to rule, we start fresh, no more shadows." 2 weeks later, the winter sun shone brightly over the private airstrip outside of Seoul. The air was crisp, smelling of snow and jet fuel. Nia stood on the tarmac, wrapped in a white wool coat, watching the technicians finish the pre-flight checks on the Gulfstream. She heard the footsteps behind her, slow, steady, unmistakable. Jae-sun stood there. He was leaning on a cane, an elegant black stick with a silver handle, but he looked strong. The color had returned to his face, and his suit was, as always, impeccable. "You cleared the flight plan," he said. "Detroit." "It's home," Nia said, turning to face him. "I have a father to check on, and a cat I left with a neighbor." Jae-sun nodded slowly. He looked at the plane, then back at her. The silence stretched, heavy with unsaid words. He wasn't going to ask her to stay. He was too proud, and he respected her too much to cage her again. "The 50 million, Jae-sun said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small black ledger device. "I transferred it to a clean account for you, plus a consulting fee. You are a wealthy woman, Nia Banks." Nia took the device. She looked at it, then looked at him. "You're letting me go." "I told you," Jae-sun said, his voice low and intense. "I am not a jailer. You paid your debt. You saved my life. You are free." Nia weighed the device in her hand. It was freedom. It was safety. It was everything she had ever wanted when she was sitting in that cold loft in Detroit. She walked over to him, closing the distance. She slipped the device into his breast pocket, patting it gently. "Keep it," she said. "Invest it for me." Jae-sun's eyes widened slightly. "You are not leaving." "I'm going to Detroit to pack," Nia smiled, a genuine, dazzling smile that warmed the cold air between them. "And to get my cat, and then I'm coming back." "To Seoul." "To you," she corrected. She grabbed the lapels of his coat and pulled him down for a kiss. It was soft, promising, and full of a future that hadn't existed 2 weeks ago. "Someone needs to manage your cybersecurity. Your passwords are terrible." Jae-sun wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him, disregarding the cane. He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes completely. "Then hurry back, Crypto Queen," he whispered against her lips. "The throne is cold without you." Nia pulled away, walking backward toward the plane, her laughter ringing out in the clear winter air. As she boarded the jet, she didn't look back at the city or the danger. She looked only at the man waiting for her, the dragon she had tamed, knowing that the real story was just beginning.